Hello gents, it's Roman with Basic to Final. I had a request on planning. This video will address that, and I'll do my best to keep this video brief. Quick disclaimer, some people may not have a lot of time to devote to DCS, and as such from planning, they may come home from work with only an hour to go and they just want to jump straight in. That's totally fine. They may benefit from this video, but this video is more tailored to a team environment, be it a group of friends or maybe a squadron. Additionally, this video will address tactical planning and a little bit of operational planning, but I will not be addressing strategic planning. Again, I'm primarily focused on tactical planning in this video. First, aside from DCS, let's look at general aviation planning and review of basic pilot competencies. General aviation planning often addresses the following topics: communication, air traffic control frequencies for ground, tower, departure, and approach; navigation, such as your initial point, where's your end point, what are your checkpoints in between, what navigational aids do you have, such as landmarks, radio navigational aids such as ADF and VOR, GPS, and for DCS, inertial navigation systems; weather at the departure field and the destination; winds, such as surface winds and winds aloft; what is the cloud layer, fog and visibility; temperature and dew point; and of course a synthesis, which often includes planning related to aircraft performance on all the above factors, and additionally takeoff time, estimated landing time, time en route, loiter time, fuel required and fuel reserve, takeoff run, brake performance under current conditions, center of gravity, landing weight, etc. And this is just general aviation before we even throw in simulated combat operations in DCS, requiring unit coordination, player coordination, time on target strikes, CAP, SEED, destruction of enemy air defenses, combat search and rescue, and more. Before we continue, it's important to note the aircraft to be flown has a big effect on planning. The way I plan and execute a mission in my Viggen with its computer navigation system is vastly different from my Mark I eyeball approach with my F5 or P-51. The nitty-gritty details of combat aviation planning is a vast subject. In this video, I will highlight the areas that I tend to focus on. Okay, with all that said, let's look at realistic planning in DCS. I found it useful to follow a general framework for planning. I give you the Mission Data Workbook, a planning tool, and a kneeboard reference. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at how I use this document. Okay, on the top of the Mission Data Workbook, you see the date. I often plan my missions in advance. We have scheduled days that I like to fly with the people I fly with. I note the briefing time, what time am I supposed to get on TeamSpeak and listen to the briefing, the takeoff time, and the landing time, of course. And of course, flight codes. And on your screen, you can see different meanings for different flight codes. The board and BUNO number, we track maintenance, and of course, with more hours on the airframe, more maintenance required, and expected failure rates go up, and all that kind of thing. So we kind of track that, and that's why I note that on my form. It just makes my paperwork on the other end, my debriefing kind of side, flight log, a little bit easier. Underneath that, mission overview, I'll note the objective, the mission, any situational details that I need to know. It's kind of a quick area for me to sketch things out and kind of get it formatted in my mind, and I'll just kind of write my notes through there. Be it a SEED mission, a combat air patrol, a strike, training mission, whatever it is, I'll put it in there. Underneath that Rolex, I'll note any time information. Underneath that base, I'll note any, whatever the base is for the night. So it'd be a base of 5, and I say, hey, what's your altitude, what's your angels, whatever. They can say base plus 5, and I'll know they're at that 10,000 feet. The hard deck, if we have a hard deck, I'll note that. My bingo fuel, I'll note that there. Formation, whether it's parade, combat spread, whatever the formation is, I'll note that. And my joker fuel, I'll throw that on the bottom. On the right side of that, in big numbers, I put out my bug out state on fuel. When I hit this fuel state, I'm out. My bug out state on arms. If I run out of Fox 2s and Fox 3s and Fox 1s, I'm bugging out. Whatever it is, I'll note it there. Underneath that, air unit organization for a section, division, or flight. I'll note their call sign, be it, let's call it Viper 1, Viper 1-2, Viper 1-3, Viper 1-4. I'll write it out. Their loadout, maybe Viper 1-1 and Viper 1-2 are harm, SEED, and the other guys are like heavy ground strike with CBUs. Whatever it is, I'll note it. Frequencies and channels for TACAN, where are they going to be anchored at? Anything I'll note in that column. And then of course on the right side, anchor point, where are they anchored at? What's their altitude? Anything that may correspond to that type of information, I'll put in that box. On the bottom, in supporting units, I'll note their call sign, be it a tanker, an AWACS, or other flights. Maybe we're working with other people, or there's a lot of different flights going on, different units. I'll note it all in there. What are their roles? What frequencies can we contact them on? If they're a tanker, TACAN, that kind of thing. And of course, the anchor point, angels, etc. That was the same as above. Any relevant information, I'll throw that in there. On the bottom underneath that, I throw known threats. And so we have an intelligence wing, and they normally provide, most of the time, good intelligence. So if they throw, hey, there's an SA-6, SA-3, whatever it is, I'll actually go through and make sure I work out that threat. What's the engagement radius? What's the estimated detection radius? And what countermeasures am I going to use? Now, this is typically something that you train to, but I found that in stressful times, it's very useful to have a kneeboard that I can just simply look down right away and remind myself, hey, 8 kilometers, I'm a dead guy. Underneath that, weather, temperature, cloud, we'll get to clouds in a second, visibility, winds at the ground, and of course winds aloft. And weather has a huge effect on operations, and people will really underestimate weather a lot of the time. But say I've got a big layer and I'm up in the mountains at Caucasus or whatnot, and I want to come down. I rose up through the layer and I'm coming back down, and the mountains are in the clouds. If I just come down willy-nilly, I could strike the ground. It could be pretty dangerous. So getting up and getting down through the weather, and I just found it useful to note, and it's my last minute check kind of to remind me, hey, how am I planning things around my weather? Underneath that, airfield, so the identifier of the airfield, TACAN, ILS, runway length, and I'll also note frequencies there a lot of the time. Divert field, TACAN, ILS, runways, that kind of thing. I'll note that in my airfield. Next page, page 2, fuel and navigation planner. Here I note my waypoints for the flight. At TOT, time on target, I'll note my time, be it a lapse time or a Zulu time or local time, whatever it is. Lat longs for each waypoint, MGRS grid if I want to use that instead. The leg and trip distance, how far is each leg and what type of distance is the total distance. Fuel remaining, so if I get to waypoint 5 and I see that I'm 2,000 pounds lower than what I planned for, that's a good sign that, hey, stuff is not going right, and I really need to think about, am I going to be able to, 1, execute my mission fully, or do I need to start thinking about seriously conserving fuel? What can I do different? Underneath that, V-speeds and drag workbook. Now, I've been really focused on the F-18 lately, so this is kind of tailored towards that, but I'll actually go through and work out, all my weights for fuel, weights for ground ordnance, air ordnance, and my total takeoff weight. And then with that information, I can go plug in my V-speeds, and I'll actually go through and calculate, V1, V2, VR, that kind of thing. And there's more, and you can kind of tailor this to what aircraft you're using. But that's pretty much it. And I found these 2 pages have really helped me out with not only reference information, but going through a proper planning framework. And so we didn't really get into any of the technicals on route selection or any of the nitty-gritty details here, but this is the mission data workbook that I use, and I found it useful. You might be thinking, all this is fine, but how do you plan? This only addresses items that you plan for. And you would be right. If I was to go through the entire process with various scenarios, 1, this video would be hours long, and 2, probably nobody would be watching it. The bottom line, one plans by thinking critically and addressing the who, what, when, where, and how. Okay, I'm sorry if this video was kind of a cop-out. If there's an interest in planning and you want me to go into more detail, I can definitely go through and kind of break down each item in extreme detail. I can look at route selection, I can go through with the fuel planning and actually work it through, but the video is probably going to be a lot longer and not so cleanly edited. But if there's an interest, let me know, and I'll definitely do that. Hey, thank you so much for watching. If you have any other specific questions, feel free to ask me in the comments. And if you liked this video and found it to be worth your time, please consider helping us out by liking, commenting, or subscribing below. Again, thank you so much for watching.